In Northern Ireland, more and more citizens want unification with the Republic of Ireland, and the Catholic head of government is indeed planning a vote. One reason is that many people no longer feel like they belong to old identities, and that would have far-reaching consequences for Europe too. Immediately at the border crossing, a street sign illustrates the conflict of the people living there. "Welcome to Northern Ireland" is written there, the north meticulously painted over. The island of Ireland has been experiencing an identity crisis along religious lines for centuries. At the beginning of the 20th century, tensions manifested themselves in the split into the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Catholics, historically disadvantaged and discriminated against, sought independence and self-determination, while Protestants remained loyal to the United Kingdom and supported partition. And that's a gap that still exists today. This conflict was recalled again on the 50th anniversary. 50 years ago, the people of Northern Ireland voted in a referendum on whether to remain in the kingdom. Almost 99% of voters, the Unionists, voted for it at the time. Also because many Republicans who support unification with Ireland boycotted the vote. For a long time, reunification was dismissed as a pipe dream. In 2024, however, it seems more realistic than ever. Support for this has steadily increased in recent years, from 14% in 2015 to 31% in 2022, according to a survey. And for the first time, Sinn Féin, which was once considered the political arm of the paramilitary IRA, is a Republican party that is the strongest force in the Northern Irish Parliament. In February, Catholic Michelle O'Neill was sworn in as head of government after a 2-year blockade by the largest Protestant Unionist party, the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP. Immediately after taking office, O'Neill said she expected a new referendum within 10 years. There is a growing group within the Northern Irish population that is sympathetic to reunification, a development that can also be attributed to demographic change. In 2021, for the first time, there were more Catholics than Protestants living in Northern Ireland. The former tend to favor a united Ireland. Surveys also show that leaving the EU has led to more and more people speaking out in favor of reunification. The majority of Northern Irish people, 56%, voted to remain in the EU in 2016, but had to follow Brexit as part of the United Kingdom. Reunification would initiate a return to the EU, something Dublin and Brussels had negotiated during the Brexit negotiations. And this would present Brussels with a challenge. The Northern Ireland Protocol, which regulates the movement of goods between Northern Ireland and Great Britain since Brexit, would then actually no longer apply, because the entire island of Ireland would be part of the EU. The negotiated special regulations would then no longer apply, and a hard EU external border and the rules would apply. That was also explained by Katie Hayward, the professor of political sociology at Queen's University in Belfast. Brussels would have to insist that these rules be enforced, which would lead to renewed disruption to trade between Britain and the island. And that's a scenario that offers political fuel. It's also crucial that there are a growing number of people who do not define themselves by religion or by an exclusively Irish or British nationality, and therefore feel appealed to parties with different goals. If you talk to Unionists and Republicans, it quickly becomes clear that it is precisely this middle that they want to convince. The DUP politician Gary Middleton believes in practical solutions. In a referendum, more and more people would be guided by the question of which option promises them a better life. That's what he said in his office in the Stormont Parliament building. That's why we as Unionists must show that Northern Ireland can function as part of the United Kingdom, he said. Middleton argues that being part of the kingdom brings many benefits for Northern Irish people, such as easy access to the British market and the ability to use the UK's free NHS health service. In Northern Ireland, these promises do not inspire much hope, though. Because in Great Britain, the economy is sluggish, the NHS is devastated, and the waiting lists for routine operations are longer than ever. The Conservative government has held back on financial concessions in recent months. The Sinn Féin Republicans, on the other hand, are campaigning for a reunified welfare state. At headquarters in Belfast, MP Declan Kearney is in his element when he talks about the benefits. He says, studies show that if we merge the health and education system and tax models, the economy would be more resilient, GDP would increase, and it would be much more efficient and cost-effective. Well, in theory, that sounds promising. However, much is still uncertain, such as what would become of the regional government in Belfast and how the restructuring of the pension system could be accomplished without loss of pension rights for the elderly. And then there's the question of whether a referendum or even reunification could reopen old wounds. A vote would endanger political peace and lead to terrible instability. That's what is the critics by some unionists here. And ultimately, none of this will be decided in Northern Ireland alone. According to the Good Friday Agreement, which provides for the possibility of a referendum, reunification requires the consent of the majority of both parts of the island. And so far, polls show that the majority of people in the Republic of Ireland would vote for it. But if you ask more closely, for example, whether the Irish would be willing to step in for the subsidies that Northern Ireland receives from London, then their willingness decreases. There are still a lot of unanswered questions. Nobody wants a chaotic, ill-advised referendum like 2016. Members of Northern Ireland's equine industry protested at Belfast Docks on Thursday night over what they described as a continuing Irish sea border. And there you see one of the issues. That's why I bring the example. They claim many aspects of trading between Northern Ireland and Great Britain had not improved since the deal which led to the Democratic Unionist Party returning to Stormont. The protesters were joined by a number of sheep and poultry farmers, and they called on the government to take immediate action. Phelim Crane, who has a horse and a pony business in Irvinstone in the county Fermanagh, he said new regulations introduced under the Northern Ireland Protocol in January 2021 had been decimating. The Northern Ireland Protocol was the part of the UK's Brexit deal with the EU, which introduced new checks on goods from Great Britain at Northern Ireland's ports, and that would be worse with the reunification. And it was later amended by the Windsor Framework, though. It's been a disaster, according to Crane. We would have bought a lot of animals in Great Britain and brought them home to Northern Ireland. We can no longer do that due to blood tests which are required for animals traveling from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, he says. The DUP walked out of the devolved government at Stormont in February 2022 in protest against the post-Brexit trading rules. The deal, which saw it return to Stormont at the start of the year, will reduce checks and also paperwork on goods moving from the rest of the UK into Northern Ireland. However, Crane still says that despite the deal, there had been no change in his situation. We need to do something about it, and it needs to be done ASAP, he says. Crane says he had written to DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, who Crane said was unaware of the problems and will work at them going forward, as they say. A poster reading "No Irish Sea Border" was displayed at this protest again, and we know that this is completely the DUP's talk. The DUP walked out of Stormont over the Irish Sea border, and we know that. There are more people that believe that nothing has changed since the deal, but it's usually unionists saying that. They say we travel backwards and forwards across the water, and some of our customers in yard do the same, and we want to be able to move freely with our animals here. It's nearly impossible for people to make a living bringing horses backwards and forwards across the water. They say there was also a major welfare issue with having animals standing in lorries at the ports for hours and hours. The sheep farmers there say also that's importing from Britain had become impossible. They say if they take livestock across the mainland and don't get it sold, they have to leave it there for 6 months before they can bring it back home again, which they think is ridiculous. But now imagine that the plans with reunification come, then the whole system will just work like every other EU external border and not according to the Northern Ireland Protocol. And that's why I believe, of course, I think at some point in the future we will see reunification of Ireland. But with the current generation still living, I think there will be a lot of political tension there, and I'm afraid we will see more violence if it comes to that referendum. It is, I know that I have a number of Irish viewers as well, and Northern Irish viewers, and I think this is a really difficult situation. As long as people as Jeffrey Donaldson are there, it will get heated up again. But at least they have returned to Stormont, and they have a functioning government now after a lot of damage was done to Northern Ireland. But there is no easy solution for the whole thing. Northern Ireland's situation is so unique and so complex that I don't even dare predict the future here. But if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.